Welcome, zombie fans, to this week's episode of Reanimated. I'm H.A. Conrad here in Brooklyn, and I'm here with my intrepid co-host, as always, Stuart Tiffin, who's coming to you live, or not live, from the West Coast.
This is not a taped recording of me talking to you. This is we're having a live discussion.
Yes, we are.
That will then be taped and then republished.
That's true.
But yes, coming at you from NorCal Studios of Reanimated headquarters. Hello.
Greetings. So today we are talking about episode 11 of Fear the Walking Dead. But before that, we actually have a few news tidbits, a lot more than we've had recently. And I think that that's usual since we're in the ramp up to Halloween. But in any case, I found a super disturbing article about praying mantises that eat the brains of hummingbirds. And there is a visual of this. And I guess I wasn't aware that praying mantises actually preyed upon birds. I thought the thing I always think about is when they bite their mates' heads off. And I knew that they were fierce in terms of eating other bugs. I just didn't realize that this was something that they did. And apparently, there's an article that we'll link to, but apparently the person who took this photo of a praying mantis eating a hummingbird brain, hanging off of a hummingbird feeder, no less, found this out, that they actually prey upon small birds, especially hummingbirds, and they eat their brain because it's the most nutritious. Avi. So, did you know this, Stuart?
I had never heard of this, and these pictures
they are disturbing. So just throwing that out there. It's a
large mantis.
I don't know.
A big one.
I don't know that I've ever seen one that large, and I think I'd be really scared of seeing it. And one of the things that the person who wrote the article said was that it turned its head to look at him while it was eating the hummingbird brain, and I'm like, oh my god. A little traumatizing. I don't mean to be making light of it, but I'm laughing because I'm scared.
Well, also this photographer is partially to blame because he clearly set up his camera on a tripod to film what might happen here. This is not like webcam quality. This is SLR. This is someone who took their time, was like, hey, maybe this mantis will kill this hummingbird. Let's see what happens.
Well, I think he did it because he was taking photos of the hummingbirds, and then this just was a magical happenstance. But in any case, yes, there it is, but viewer discretion is advised. And then next up, I think I heard a hint of this, but I had not really heard of this whole thing. But there is apparently a zombie Christmas musical coming out in time for the holidays, called Anna and the Apocalypse. And there's a little article up on Nerdist with a trailer. Did you happen to watch it, Stuart?
I did, and I didn't read very closely at first, and I didn't realize it was going to be a musical, but then the trailer at least makes it look like it's tolerable as far as musicals go. It looks
a little bit like Buffy Once More with Feeling meets Shaun of the Dead, and hey, I'll give it a shot, and the overall, the couple of the lines that we saw look pretty pithy, so hey, I like a good zombie movie around the holidays, so I'll bite, so to speak. And so I'm looking forward to seeing that come out for the Christmas season. And there was also an article, and this came out a couple weeks ago, and I've seen this before, but so it really isn't anything new, but somebody chose to write their thesis on it, and it was about why the popularity of zombies have kind of taken over the culture, why there's been such a proliferation of zombie genre films and things like that, and it's actually a copyright issue. And I had seen this before. I don't know if I entirely...
We've talked about this before.
We have talked about it a few times, and again, I think kudos to the person who decided to write their thesis on it, so it's just a little bit more of that, but it's about, how they kind of screwed up the copyright during Night of the Living Dead, and that's why so many people are able to kind of take this and run with it. But I think it's more than that, personally. And I think that, I think that in addition to this, there is the acceptance of sort of corniness, schlockiness, DIY type of horror things that happen in zombie films that don't happen in other film genres that make it a little bit more ripe for the taking, so to speak. I'm full of these today. overly ripe for the taking. What are your thoughts on this?
Only that it's like well-trodden ground,
Yeah.
I guess. We all knew that it was public,
Domain,
that it was
yeah.
in the public domain. And I guess it stands to reason that that's why so many people got to see it.
Right.
I don't think that there's necessarily a one-to-one, like apples-to-apples comparison saying, because it's so easy to see, that is why it's so popular. This is a genre.
Right.
I think it's because it's a quality piece of work upon which other quality pieces of work were made
Right.
by George Romero.
Agreed. And I think it was also...
and those are still for profit and not in the public domain. And it's their popularity is not like linked somehow to the fact that they just screwed up the copyright on the original.
Right.
I guess that's my take.
No, my take too. And I also think that that particular piece of work was groundbreaking on many different levels. And I also think spoke to a lot of issues that were happening at that time and was able to give a voice to them in ways that other films were not. And that is also part of it as well. I think that this is makes it a little too easy and simplistic, but hey, if you're going to write a thesis on zombies, go for it.
But then also, if you write a thesis and then somebody comes along from The Verge and writes a 4-paragraph article summing up your thesis,
agreed.
I am hoping that there's more to the thesis than what they've represented here.
Yeah.
Because ain't no thesis, there's four paragraphs.
True. And rounding out the news items, there you found this like cool little article, which we've seen some of these before, and it's always like a theory about how the zombie outbreak happened in Fear the Walking Dead and Walking Dead, because they never really say exactly. So I'm going to let you take this one away.
Okay, so things that we know from The Walking Dead is the main thing is that everybody's got it, right? Everybody's infected. Yep. That's something we learned at the end of season 1. Although this is ground that the comic books never really... I mean, the comic books also accept the fact that if anybody dies, they turn. But they never went to the CDC and had this like scientist explain it. So the number one of the fan theories that this article on Digital Spy expounds upon is that it's a fast-acting virus that was airborne. That kind of explains why it's so widespread. Mm-hmm. So I can get behind that one. That seems pretty plausible to me. Number 2 is that it's a spore, a la Girl with All the Gifts. And this is propagated by the fact that since zombies don't need to breathe, but they still do the moaning and the weird noises, they're very loud, Walking Dead zombies. Some people posit that this is them spreading the spores through exhalation, which is kind of credible also.
Yep.
Third is the water is poisoned. Apparently, Fear the Walking Dead pilot had a lot of shots of water, and I don't remember talking about this with you, and maybe we missed that as a big nod, because that is essentially that the pilot of Fear the Walking Dead is the beginning of the virus, right? That like we don't get to see day 1 in the original show, so there is a chance that Dave Erickson or and to an extent Robert Kirkman were trying to tell us something in that pilot. We should probably go back and watch it again.
I do remember there being a lot of water references, but I would watch it again just to kind of go through this without question. I think that's an interesting theory.
Yeah. The fourth theory is that it's terrorism, that apparently there was a scene in Torn Apart in one of the webisodes where a guy with a shotgun says it's a terrorist plot against America, with the survivor claiming that terrorists found a better way to kill people than bombs. And this is unlikely because Walking Dead has never gone this route of terrorism or political anything, so I'm going to discount that one right off the bat. And then finally, the Breaking Bad theory that Walter White is responsible. And the show has gone to great lengths to show us to present to us the parallels between the other greatest AMC property and this one, what with Blue Meth and similar cars. Apparently there was the Ballad of Heisenberg just on episode 10 of Fear the Walking Dead, or when they walked into the bazaar. I don't know, did you believe in that one?
I definitely think that the writers are doing think that was absolutely deliberate, and I'm kind of hoping for a Bryan Cranston cameo somewhere in there. And, they did the whole thing with Glenn in the car and whatever in Walking Dead. And I don't think that these are accidents at all. I think they are deliberately trying to make some connections, even if it's just for their own fun. They may not do any payoff with it at some point, but that could be that could be an interesting idea. I also think that just given the opioid crisis right now in the U.S., there could easily be a parallel drawn between these two. And, all the things that we see right now in the news, I mean, there is, like, basically when you're looking at things and the word zombies is mentioned, we see all the stuff about spice and Florida and drugs and people are zombie-like. So I don't think that it's too far of a stretch for them to kind of grab that sort of, like, thin line between his special mix and this. It wouldn't be too much of a leap, but then you have to kind of say, well, how would everybody be involved in this? So I think my money's more on the water or the spore idea, but I would like to see a tie-in to Breaking Bad just because I think it's funny. So,
and personally, I would love to never know.
Really?
Once you explain this kind of thing,
well, that's kind of the fun of it, right?
Yeah, just leave it unknown, and that's going to give you more ground to work with in the future. Right? That's where I end up on it.
But I don't mind them teasing it. I think it's funny that they're teasing it, and to me, it's a little bit clever. Sometimes a little too clever, but still, I think it's a fun thing for the fans to just get all crazy about.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Faux show.
As clearly we are. So, are you ready to chat about episode 11?
You mean serpiente?
Yes, serpiente, which they use that word like 10 times in this episode. So if you missed it, just sit back and wait a couple minutes.
Yeah, let's head to Mexico.
All right. So this episode, directed by Joseph Woodlaka and written by Mark Richard and Laura Signorino. It aired last week, and basically we've got, the tie-in, the continuation of the Madison Walker, Victor story, looking for water. And as you would expect, there's definitely a little bit of tension because basically Madison has given away all of their... she basically rescued she bought Victor's freedom, but now doesn't necessarily have a ton to bargain with, and they are on their way to Daniel's Dam. So it's kind of interesting because, Walker doesn't know Victor, and what he does know of him isn't good. So I think that he's got a little bit of skepticism in terms of what they're going to find at the dam, and everything he's seen to Victor up until this point shows him that he's untrustworthy. So that's kind of an interesting dynamic.
Walker becomes less and less popular in my head.
Yeah.
with that popularity contest is going on throughout this episode.
Agreed.
And I was already I was already talking to you about how I did not enjoy his response to the Terrence incident back at the camp. And the fact that he's felt obliged to get more and more like fascist on the ranch.
Agreed.
He was invited in. I don't know why Madison ever decided to give him the keys to the weapons locker. Like, I never understood that decision. But then in this episode, he's basically just grumpy or terrified until the final scene. Mm-hmm. Like he is angry at everybody around him all the time. And the way he acts throughout this episode is disappointing. Like, I kind of want to like him more than I do, but I feel like he's just a jerk.
Well, and I feel part of how they portray him is, and this is something you and I have, again, talked about ad nauseum during this series, is that there's things about characters that they just sort of throw in there, and it doesn't match the things that we have learned about them up until this point. So... the Walker that we have learned about up until the point when the Black Hats came to the ranch was nothing like what we have been seeing, like in terms of his behavior after they come to the ranch. So the whole thing with the weapons locker, I agree with you. I don't understand why the ranchers would give up that kind of a leverage, just to keep the peace and whatever. And it seems to be going south very fast for them, and you need to have a balance of power. And I just think maybe enlist and have some of Walker's men join the ranch men in terms of protection, in terms of, I don't want to call it the militia, but maybe have like the camp security or whatever, but don't hand over the keys. That's crazy.
Yeah, but I mean, Jake says, I don't know, we're talking about it 2 episodes ago at this point, but Jake says, while Madison is like, just give him the keys, Jake. He's like, why? We'll become prisoners on our own land.
Right.
That's actually not what's happened. I mean, it kind of is, but actually what's happened is this just gave Walker everything he needed to say on a whim, you guys are out of here.
Yeah.
We're done with you.
Exactly.
And that's what he does a few times during this episode, is when things aren't going his way, he's just like, well, I hope you enjoy the desert. And I'm just like, dude.
It seems like a threat that he continually uses, and it's just really, it starts to get really annoying and tiring. And it's also, it's not like Madison isn't trying to work out the problem and solve the water problem. She is. She isn't going to give up just because they were told no initially. Madison doesn't do that. And Walker should know this about her, given that he has basically given her all this respect from the get-go. So to me, it just doesn't seem in line with what we know about Walker, what Walker knows about Madison, and how they have built up their partnership at this point. Like, it seems like he's way too willing to just throw in the towel on the ranchers and on Madison, just on way too easily. And it's not as if he hasn't seen his share of difficulties when the Black Hats were dealing with the ranchers, and all of that changed when Madison came on the scene. So his lack of trust in her, I don't find plausible, and it really did bother me this episode. And to me, I find it just extraordinarily annoying that the writers decided to do this, because to me, they really have messed with a character that they spent so much time building up. And it's not that he can't have flaws. Of course people could have flaws. It's just the way that they portray it doesn't jibe really with what we know about him. So,
and it makes the end of the episode, I mean, we're kind of shooting to the end, but it does make the end of the episode and future episodes more difficult to get behind, because why would Madison be so eager to, I don't know, like, the dude has been threatening her.
Yeah, he's been threatening her and her family and all the people on the ranch, who she feels like, yeah, she's protecting her kids, but she does have an overall idea of all of us are in this together, and it continually feels like Walker's just, Black Hats are nothing. You know what I mean? So, and she doesn't necessarily have any reason to feel that way, other than, I mean, yes, ultimately her goal is to protect her kids, and so she's going to do that. But I think she's also kind of come over to the way of thinking, hey, as a group, we're better off, and we got to problem solve as a group. And there isn't an us and them with her at this point, and maybe it's because she's seen so many of those situations spiral into like a really dark place. But it just feels like he would have more reason to be like, okay, we're on the ranch, let's make this work, than she does. So, but anyway.
So let's start closer to the beginning. We starts off with the road trip, where already Walker's kind of peeved. He's being kind of accusatory with Strand just because they run into a roadblock. And I'm like, yeah, Strand clearly set this up for you, Walker. Settle down, Big Nancy.
Yeah.
And so they have to circumvent a Walker roadblock. I didn't super love this scene. It looked really set up.
It did.
It looked like TV. Like, this is a set.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I like the scenes of them driving through Mexico,
I did too, and it was a little bit
countryside.
It was also a little bit of a respite from our usual, and this is to me, this episode is the equivalent of the grocery store run in 28 Days Later, because there isn't. I mean, yes, there's some drama and whatever, but overall, it's a pretty positive episode, even up until the end. So, despite some of the issues that they run into.
I mean, it's got some serious tension, but yeah. So they end up in this sewer system, and the thing I liked best about this sequence was how scared Walker looked all the time. And Michael Grey Eyes does a great job of going, kind of, as much as it was annoying how Walker was written in this episode as being such a jerk all the time. Michael Grey Eyes does a great job of bouncing back and forth between angry at Strand and Madison, and like borderline shooting himself in the sewers.
Right.
When he's like, Madison, Strand, they're coming. You're like,
Yep.
oh yeah, he sounds like he's not having a good time. So
Well,
I enjoyed that.
and that's also, but to me, that's also not in keeping with what we know of his character.
Well, his character does not hang out in sewers.
It doesn't, but it's still not, like, he's still not, I don't know. He isn't this much of, like, a scaredy cat, I guess. But what I did enjoy was I love the interactions between Madison and Strand and how they do have a lot of trust in each other. And Madison's like, yeah, Strand doesn't just go into sewers. That's not his deal, you know? Like, and they just kind of, and I like how she and Strand just get to work and they're like, okay, well, we got to kill this thing. We got to clear it. What do you mean clear it? And it's like this totally decomposed, disgusting walker in there. So I liked I feel like the chemistry between those two actors is really good, and the writing of their characters was awesome. And those were my favorite parts of this episode, were the Victor and Madison interactions.
No, yeah, they were good. And then later the Daniel and Strand
those were good too.
Interactions were good. But one more point on Walker, and then I'll leave him alone. But honestly, this is the first time we see him even interact close to zombies.
Oh, I guess you're right. That's true.
You know, he's only been about human on human stuff, and he's great at that, at being, you know, like trying to
torture
scalp
people,
Jake
and stuff.
and be a jerk to people. But he doesn't actually hang out with zombies too much. And
all right, that's a good point.
That's a big failure of this season in a way. That we haven't seen the Black Hats have to deal with the zombies.
Right, and that is, you know, Madison and Strand's forte, at least in just dealing with them.
And that's also, like you said, Madison's is like, we're all in this together, and maybe it's because the ranchers and the Black Hats haven't had to deal with the actual threat, that they still have their heads not on straight, and they're still worrying about, you know, one-upmanship and like taking one group over the other when we need to be more holding hands and kumbayaing. So,
and that is a good point, because maybe, and this is something we've discussed before, how unrealistic it was to have the people on the ranch be separate in such a way that there's only a certain percentage of them that are prepared to fight. And maybe that's where we're going to see the whole thing turn in the relationships on the ranch, is when people actually have to deal with the walkers on a day-to-day. Everybody has to, as opposed to just a few.
The scene shifts to then a scene of Daniel, Ephraim, and what's that other guy's name, Oscar or something?
Yep.
Driving away from a crowd of people who are shooting at them. It seems this is like a different. The scene starts in the middle / the end of a violent altercation between the water truck and Colonia. We don't know. It seems like, their populace, who they've been trying to give free water to, has turned on them. And it's not really clear why, except for that one guy was like, "You've taken over the dam. You're like Dante now." Right. But clearly Dante was never like going out and giving them water in the streets. So this does feel to me like a little bit of a made up tension that doesn't need to be there.
Well, it feels made up, but then I was thinking about this because I felt the same way, and I was trying to, you know, work my mind around what was going on. And basically they have, and this is, you know, they have set themselves up as rationing the water because they can't necessarily give it to everybody because it'll dry up. So then all the people who were so scared of Dante have probably come out of the woodwork. So you have a much larger population than you had before. At least that's out in the open now. And they want water, and they're scared it's going to run out, and to have somebody else controlling it maybe is a terrifying thing. And there's a lot more of them than there are of the people at the dam. And I just think people panic when resources are short and when somebody else is controlling them. So it isn't totally unbelievable to me, but I do think I agree with you in that it does feel a little bit contrived, and it felt like they could have given a little bit more exposition on that, like maybe shown why the people were feeling the shortage more. You know what I mean? Like it felt like it came out of nowhere.
And if Lola had the ability to make a water fountain just spout water every day at 5:00,
why doesn't she just do that? You know,
right.
So the people can come and get it. So.
Yeah. And that way they're not having to drive out there with their trucks and get potentially shot at. Yeah, like that maybe that's just too easy. So when they get back to the camp, though, there's a funny scene where Daniel sees somebody and shoots at him twice, and that person like goes ooh and flops down like a fish.
Yep.
And then you're like, oh, that's Strand, and Daniel just missed. And he's shooting at a guy who's like 15 feet away.
Yeah,
and
no
he
way.
missed twice.
No way.
I just thought that was hilarious. Also, it was hilarious in the way that like Strand's reaction to being shot at was just like, ugh.
Yeah, I know, and he just flops down like it was totally like belly down immediately.
Cool. And then I really enjoy, I really enjoy every scene of this reunion between Daniel and Madison.
Yep.
He's like, she's like, hey, it's so great that you're alive. I thought you were burned up. Do you remember that?
Yeah, like
hey, are you still crazy?
Are you still insane?
I'm better now.
It almost was very, there was actually that part, and then there's another part where Oscar, who had gotten injured, said and Ephraim says, "Oh, it's only a flesh wound." And I felt like somebody who really loved Monty Python was writing this episode, because there were definitely a couple of references like that I was like, this is a little slapstick. This is a little British comedy. Anyway,
I have a feeling we're gonna run into zombie Oscar at some point before the season's over.
Yeah, it certainly felt that way, didn't it? But yeah, no, the reunion between Madison and Daniel was awesome. And, it's interesting because his reaction, his reaction makes the most sense to me. The news that Ophelia is alive, he's a little bit more moderate and a little bit more he is not I think because Strand had lied to him before, and I think he doesn't necessarily believe it or isn't ready to believe it yet, or just wants to kind of sit with it because he had that hope before, and now here's Madison saying that she's totally fine and on the ranch, and eventually he comes to believe it, but
I think he does right away, because Walker's there too, and then Walker's able to, they have that discussion later in the episode, him, Walker, and Daniel.
He does, but he's processing. You know what I mean? There isn't the joy that you would expect to see, but there is definitely there's relief. There's a few other things, but he's just not quite ready to embrace it. And
what do you think of that? What do you think of that exchange between him and Lola, where she's like, "Don't you want to go to your daughter at the ranch?" And he's like, "She's safe, but you're not."
Right. Well, he made a promise, and I mean, Daniel, basically, we saw that kind of crazy episode with him where he basically thinks that he was saved several times, and maybe he feels like Lola was part of it, and she's one of the people that saved him.
Yep, true.
But there also, I think, is fear to confront Ophelia because of her reaction when she found out what Daniel was, and that basically her whole upbringing was a lie. And what he had done before he came to America. And so there's a reluctance there. And then even more so when he finds out from Walker her part in taking over the ranch. I mean, he does not look happy. And I think there's going to be a discussion between Daniel and Ophelia at some point, of course. But
we didn't talk about the Ophelia lines in the last episode where she's talking to Nick and she's like, hey, do you ever feel bad? Or he's like, do you feel... where they're talking about the conscience that they might be struggling with over their actions. Mm-hmm. And she's like, I don't feel nearly as bad as I thought I should, or whatever. And she's like, maybe I'm more like my dad than I realized.
Right.
Which I thought was an interesting exchange to have right before a Daniel-Ophelia reunion.
Well, and I think that's, of course, where they're going, is that, they're drawing a lot of parallels there, and maybe there's some understanding on her end about what Daniel did and why. And I think you're going to see a good scene between those two before too long, probably even in the next episode. But I'm sure they'll fight about it too. So
I'm looking forward to that, though. That'll be cool. I'm hoping that they make Ophelia better.
Yeah, it's kind of
I'm
sad.
not psyched with her role right now, but that's it's good, I guess. She's like the polar opposite of a Madison. Or something. I guess Madison is to Walker as Ophelia is to Nick, or something like that.
Yeah, but the thing about Ophelia, and this is still the thing, no way would they tolerate her on that ranch, and I still can't get around that particular piece. And I know they've set it up to have her have guards and all this other stuff, but I just don't buy that they would ever tolerate her there. I think she would be an outcast, no matter what. Mm-hmm. No matter whether it was intentional or not. It's kind of hard to sit there and look at her. And she seems all hurt, like when kids won't take water from her. Can you blame the kid? Come on. Like, give me a break. So I'm kind of bummed out with what they're doing with her, too, but I'm hoping they'll recover it or bring her back somehow.
Meanwhile, back at the dam, which honestly, we never really leave the dam in this episode, Lola is unexpectedly unwilling to give them water. And she's like, I'm sorry, we have no water for you. And Madison goes, well, no, you've got a whole lake here.
Yep.
And then it becomes clear that she just doesn't have water for gringos. And,
which is weird because Walker is not a gringo. Right?
Yeah, true. But he's an outsider. And I'm pretty sure that's what it comes down to. It's like, if you don't live in the Tijuana metropolitan area, we're not going to give you water because we're already so unpopular with our own
people
neighborhoods. But then I'm like, to this, my skepticism is, how are they going to know? Are they like looking on nextdoor.com? Is there like a newsletter going out? How would anybody know that you're giving water to a different group?
Well, because I think some of the people in there, and I honestly think that Ephraim is a problem, and he's continually like making nonsensical statements that they should just open the floodgates and just give it to the people, which is like, no, because then there's nothing left for the people, you idiot. And that God will provide.
He's got great intentions. He's got great intentions, but he's clearly just like a happy-go-lucky, optimistic alcoholic.
Right. And then some of this, I think, is just there's got to be leaks in terms of the people within the dam helping out. I feel like that's what she's concerned about because she keeps looking at the other people around her. And so there's that too. But agreed, I think that this is kind of strange that she just seems unwilling, as Daniel says, to defend the water dam because she feels like it would make her like Dante, even though it's an entirely different situation. I mean, he was using the dam as collateral. He was basically the godfather of the dam. And so I just think that this was not, again, somewhat of a contrived situation. And I also don't buy that she would say no to something that would help Daniel's daughter, especially since he's already agreed to help her still and not go to his daughter. I just don't buy that she would do that.
Yeah, and she also invited Madison and her family to come live at the dam, which was a get-out-of-jail-free card for Madison. Mm-hmm. You know, but she just, here's a question for you, though. All the angry people in Tijuana, why can't they just walk down to the lake and, like, take their cans and... I mean, I know that it's being filtered to be potable.
Yeah.
But there's a whole lot of water there, and I doubt that whole lake is surrounded by a fence. And you boil that stuff, and you'll be fine.
I guess there's something we just don't know.
I suppose so.
But yeah, so there's that going on, and
so it's around this part of the show that Walker is consistently. He tells Strand that he's going to kick Madison off the camp. And then the next morning, he basically walks away from her as she's saying, "We're gonna die out there," and he's like, "Whatever, I don't care." Mm-hmm. So that's when my confidence level in Walker is at its all-time lowest. Could go lower. And then Strand does this insane thing that I cannot believe works and is definitely going to have ramifications for the rest of the season.
So he basically and there's this whole thing where, you know, Strand helps out with the guy with the belly wound. He's kind of like going around there. He gets called a snake multiple times by multiple people, but especially Daniel. And there's this whole weird contrived thing. And this also didn't sit well with me because I didn't believe it. Lola knows what the temperature is out there. She knows how the people are feeling because she almost got attacked too at some point. But it's like she keeps having these conversations with Daniel that she doesn't really believe that things are the way they are out there and gets upset that he's took shots at people. And Daniel's just like, well, I'm protecting you and I'm protecting the dam. And she's like, well, we just can't do that. And like it's like this very odd martyrdom or something that she's doing, which doesn't really line up with what we know about her. Like, I feel like she would overall do what was good for the people. I don't think she needs proof. But as a way of proof, basically Strand rigs one of the water trucks to explode it. Daniel, I almost feel like, has some more to do with... He kind of looks the other way and says as much to Victor that he's going to... Sorry, Victor did it rather than Walker. And then starts singing the Down with the Water Queen song, which I almost feel like he either fed to the crowd or he got some people up there to make those noises. Like, did you feel like that was fake? Because it felt like, that was such a deliberate thing to hear him sing that song and then to hear people chanting it.
Yeah, it was clearly I don't know. I think that it's just too convenient in a way. The fact that Strand could rig the truck to explode at the same time that there's an angry mob approaching.
Right. It doesn't
like,
feel.
How does he, the timing is a little too convenient, and it leads to this happy ending ish that we have for Madison and Strand, but it's just.
It's
too
a
many
little
things
too
just
easy.
fall in place, yeah. And then that final scene of the episode where they pull over and pick up Walker, and he gives them a grin after being like, "Yeah, I'm gonna exile all your families."
Right, and then they're all smiling at each other, and I'm like, dude, you gotta have some conversation with Walker. I mean, just because he's walking up the road like the Incredible Hulk, like Dr. Steve Banner, like, come on. Sorry.
Yeah, and we'll have to see, if she doesn't get a whole lot of credit for this. In terms of, he cannot threaten her anymore for a while unless she does something really messed up.
Well, it's also he shouldn't be threatening her at all. Like, this should be, hey,
she did steal all his money and, maybe sink his chances of getting any water. But instead now she has, in theory, a lifetime supply.
Right.
Or as long as the dam is in good shape.
Well, and we also don't know. I mean, maybe our intrepid ranchers and black hats have dug into a new water table or something.
Oh, true. Yeah, but based on the previews that I'm seeing, my Instagram feed this morning was like, by the way, some stuff's going down tonight on.
I know. It's we'll see that. I saw that as well. So
it doesn't look like things are going to.
No,
go so
it doesn't. I think again, this happy little respite and this happy ending is the last we're going to see of that for a while.
Yeah, that's another thing from recaps I was seeing last week. They're like, yeah, if you have a happy ending in a Walking Dead show,
the next one's gonna everything's gonna hit the fan in the next one.
Things are gonna go badly. So I guess that's kind of the whole episode. But I did want to also just speak to the tension between Daniel and Strand.
Yep.
Which their handshake at the end of the episode is good. Like Strand continues just smiling broadly, even though Daniel would probably rather shoot him than shake his hand.
Yeah,
and I just really like where the tension in their relationship is right now. I don't want them to fight, but I'm okay with them not being best friends.
They're okay not being best friends, but on the other hand, Victor did get word that Ophelia was okay. He brought Madison to Daniel, and basically, no matter what, Daniel doesn't know this, but Victor is trying to do the right thing. It's just in some ways against his nature to do the right thing. And he even has this cool little conversation with Madison about such a thing. That he doesn't want to let down his friends. And, with Victor, you're always wondering, is this a manipulation of Madison? But Madison and Victor seem to have an honesty with each other that other characters don't. And they have an honesty with each other that they don't have with other people.
Strand doesn't have an honesty with anybody.
He doesn't, but sometimes, like, for whatever reason with Madison, they have always had, even if that truth is uncomfortable, they seem to be okay saying it. And Victor has done this several times with Madison. So even though you're always skeptical when he does it, I still buy it a little bit more. And
the constant there might be Madison, because also Daniels has that one line in this episode where Lola's like, "Hey, do you trust her?" And he's like, "She has never lied to me."
Correct. So, so there's that. So I think Daniel, there's definitely that tension, and it will of course continue. I don't think, but Daniel's also willing to use Victor as a tool, as he did in this case, to get something, to make something happen that he believes in, and to get Ophelia, basically. And in some ways, if you look at how the way this episode went down, Daniel played much more the Victor part than Victor did in terms of manipulation. And ultimately, come on, Daniel doesn't want to see his daughter? Of course he does. But he's gonna make sure that maybe he thinks that the dam is safer and that he's there, and he does have obligations, so he's basically manipulated the situation to be able to see her on his terms. So that's kind of an interesting little twist, and I really, basically any episode with Daniel in it I really love, so I hope they continue.
Yeah, as long as he doesn't go back down the insanity wormhole, because that was not an enjoyable element of Daniel in in season 2.
No, but they've made good with him. So we shall see. And it'll also be interesting to see the Lola and Ophelia interaction, since Lola has definitely become a little bit of a surrogate for him, a surrogate for Ophelia. So that will be interesting to see how that works out.
Right.
Anyway, I'm looking forward to seeing tonight's episode, even if everything does hit the fan. And we'd love to hear your comments on this episode. So feel free to leave us a comment on our website, reanimatedpodcast.com. Send us a tweet, reanimatedpcast, or shoot us an email, reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com.
That's right. Awesome. So hit us up, let us know, and check back with us next time for what will likely be episode... which episode was this? 11? So episode 12.
This is 11, so 12. So until next time, ciao.
Bye-bye.